Chapter 2. 3 years later, Baghdad, Iraq. Victory. The smell of it was in the air, alongside the fading stench of the ruins of war. Victory, domination, excellence. He could feel the demand for it throbbing in his sinews, pulsing in his veins. He could feel the need in the stadium crowd outside, the impatient stamping of their feet, their calls and their applause. Its power and its glory electrified the air. Now it was time to electrify some nerves, goose some synapses, nudge some neurons. Jack Oriander stood in the shadows of the tunnel. Outside, his fellow contestants milled around, waiting for the officials to call for the beginning of the 100-yard dash. He felt more secure here, away from the open space. He was slightly agoraphobic anyway. That was what his dad had said. He wasn't so sure about that himself, since he didn't really have a fear of being outside. He just preferred walls around him. Pop was dead now. He'd been a captain in the Alien Earth War, and he was dead now. The army had not supplied the details, nor did the Oriander family want details. Not when it came to the aliens. Jack Oriander took a sip of cold water from a paper cup, swished it in his mouth, and spat it out. The Middle Eastern sun was hot out there. Jack wanted his mouth wet, but he didn't want his stomach bloated. He had his sunblocker lotion on, and he'd taken care to drink lots of fluids yesterday, and today as well, as carbing up for the contest. At 20 years old, he was in absolutely peak condition. His muscles, trained and corn-fed in Iowa, sang with health and speed and proportion. He'd run track and field in junior high and high school, and now college at Iowa U. Now that these kinds of things were getting back on track. The Earth had lost some time, and so had Jack, because of the war and Reconstruction. But time didn't mean that much when you were young. There seemed lots of it behind you, and lots of it ahead of you. Even though you saw people older than you, with bald heads and paunches and lines around their eyes, the idea that you'd be like that one day seemed absurd. "Win today, grow old tomorrow," Coach Donnell had said, his eyes glaring down like lasers into Jack. "We're counting on you, Jack, to put us on the map." That's what the graying, grizzled man said every day of the training. He got his message across in more ways than one. The tension in the air was thick. Jack's nerves seemed stretched as tight as violin strings. He knew that if he was going to get some help, he'd have to get it now. Around his waist was a light, flesh-colored belt of synthetic material. Jack de-velcroed a pouch, pulled out a small bottle. A fresh one. Best if fresh, his mom had always said. And though Jack wasn't sure if that applied to this stuff, his obsessive-compulsive nature made him use a fresh bottle, even though there was a half-full one in his luggage. Jack cracked open the safety seal and knocked out a pill. Hell, why not? He rattled out another one into his palm, then quickly screwed the top back on and stuffed it back into the pouch, readjusted his oversized shirt, tucking it into the elasticated top of his shorts. He looked down at the capsules. They were a deep green, seemingly embedded with silver sparkles. For a moment, he heard his old man's voice at the back of his head. "Take it from me, Jack. You've got all the drugs you really need in you already. Learn to tap those first, before you go for other ones." But he discounted it, as he'd always done. listening to the voice of the coach instead. "Tell you what, Jack, you do what you got to do to win." Jack slipped both capsules between his lips. He took the paper cup and used the small amount of water left to wash them down. Not too much. Didn't want to get too much moisture inside of him. Balance. That was the ticket. The old man was always keen on balance, yin and yang. And now the old man was dead. So if what Jack swallowed tipped the scales a little in his favor, what did it matter? Xenozip, street name Fire, from Neo Farm. Great stuff. He'd been taking Fire ever since it first came out. He'd asked the coach about it, and the guy had taken a few seconds to read the label. All natural ingredients. That was okay with the coach, just as long as there weren't any steroids in the mix. Not that the man had anything against steroids himself. Anything that could give you that extra edge was really okay by him. Judging committees were a lot more laissez-faire these days. Besides, it wasn't any worse than a couple of extra cups of coffee in the morning. That's what the ads implied, anyway. He hadn't looked into it very closely. Jack immediately noticed not only was he more alert and self-confident after swallowing one, his athletic abilities improved. Concentration, agility, coordination, all jumped into higher levels. Not only that, he felt better. Fire gave a little more zing, a little more oomph. The official line was that they made the stuff from Alien Queen Mother royal jelly. Rumor had it they used ground up alien bodies from the war. Jack didn't care. He liked the stuff. The glow that it put on life's horizons was just the icing. What Jack liked was the edge it gave him in sports. Jack waited for the glow to start, listening to the sounds outside, peeking into the light, shading his eyes. The stadium was a spectacular tribute to the reconstruction of Earth, a wonder spawn of new technology and architecture. Lots of companies had tossed in contributions to build the thing, and not just demi-creds. Big coin. A tubular confluence of lines and efficiency, of new and mighty alloys, centered around a traditional field. Wedding of the new and the old. Blimps and Zeppelin-like hovercars hung in the sky, bristling with tracking devices and media sensor arrays. Field Humanitas was the name, and these competitions in which Jack Oriander participated had been dubbed the Goodwill Games. Now that the Olympics had been destroyed, along with much of old Earth, you had to start with something after all. Something to unite people, something to celebrate the new humanity, something to take civilized minds off the savage past. A sweeter conflict among nations, a good-natured competition among athletes. Jack Oriander leaned out into the sun a bit. He could smell the familiar humanity out there. He smelled the popcorn and the hot dogs, the spilled beer and the excitement in the air. He intended to be the center of that excitement now. Yes, sirree, Bob. He felt a lick of the drug playing around his nerves, and blinked. "Yo, Oreo, you want to get your ass out here?" called Fred Staten. Staten was the other guy from the States. He was clean-cut and slender like Oriander, only he had neatly clipped blonde hair instead of black, with no widow's peak. A strapping young man. As Oriander's senses sharpened, squeezed into a fine focus by the tongues of fire, he smelled his friend's lemony deodorant and the talc on his hands. Caught a wisp of grape jam from today's breakfast, along with the astringent touch of Gatorade. We're just about set to line up. Yeah, right. Hey man, you okay? Sure. Why? I dunno. Your eyes. They're a little odd. This sun, it's kinda getting to me. That's why I'm staying in the shade as long as possible. And your hands, they're trembling some. Oriander lifted his hands. He fancied he could feel special blood pouring into them now. Fiery blood. But they'd never shaken before on fire. Man, I guess I'm just a little nervous. Aren't we all? I'll be fine. Just give me a sec. Sure, but seconds aren't mine to give, and those officials are oiling up their guns. He slapped his friend on the shoulder. You'll be fine. Take a deep breath. You're only a few feet away from 100 yards. He snapped his fingers. It'll be all over like that, and we'll go out and celebrate, huh? Yeah, right. Jack grinned. Fred was right. He should move on out. He could see the milling racers not just lining up, but slotting themselves in their starting posts. Yet the sun was not only hot, it looked terribly bright now. Much too bright. Fire had never sharpened his vision up this much before. He felt like he had just been blessed with telescopic sight. Such incredible detail. Maybe he shouldn't have taken 2 pills after all. Squaring his shoulders, pushing back the razory feeling along his spine, Jack Oriander trotted out to assume his position. As he slotted himself in line, he got the A-OK signal from Fred. Come on, Oreo! Let's show them that American sneakers can still kick butt! Jack smiled and waved. He fitted his feet into the metal stirrups, leaned down onto his knuckles. A buzzing began to keen in his ear, like an amp feeding back. He cocked his ear, waiting for the starting pistol. The finish line loomed ahead, like a magnificent promise. Glory, achievement, winning. The crowd noise died down to a hush. But the keening in his ear grew to a roar. What was... The chemical rush hit Jack Oriander like the hammer of Thor. Molten energy poured into his muscles and lightning exploded from his brain. The signal pistol went off, and his legs answered as though they'd been waiting for this moment. Their entire life. They pushed him forward, shooting him off like a bullet down a rifle chamber. Suddenly, he wasn't just Jack anymore. He could feel the atoms exploding in his sinews. He could feel a cosmic power gushing through his entire being. He was a god. The crowd went crazy. The PA system rumbled with the announcer's astonishment. Unbelievable! Jack Oriander of the USA is literally burning up the track. His face had grown a rictus of determination, and sweat burst from his brow in rivulating globules. His feet seemed to have grown wings. The air rushed past him like a wild river, and the determination to win inside his breast burst into white-hot brilliance. The yards streamed by in a flash. Jack Oriander crossed over the finish line, well ahead of the others, his feet a blur and his mind as hot as an incandescent filament in a megawatt bulb. And Jack Oriander kept on going. The crowd in the stadium and the millions watching the race would never forget the close-ups. Jack Oriander's arms pumping, his legs slamming onto the turf outside the track like John Henry's sledgehammers, his eyes gazing into madness. The young athlete from Iowa did not seem satisfied in shaving off a solid 4 seconds from the world record for the 100-yard dash. As though eager to get on to yet another race, unseen to any but him, he loped over the finish line, covering the distance between the edge of the track and the wall in a couple of blinks of the eye. Reason and sanity burned out in chemical conflagration in his cortex. He smashed through the corrugated plastic of the wall. Only the steel girder just beyond stopped his demented run. And the blood was everywhere. You can buy black market videos from media vultures. You can see shreds of skin and veins and hair torn from the speeding body and hanging from the edges of the shattered plastic wall in clumps of gore. You can see the twisted remains of the rest of the body, lying akimbo under the harsh glare, like roadkill in a cleated tank run. And, if you look closely in these tapes, you can see the medic take something from Oriander's blood-spattered pouch belt and tuck it into his own pocket. Xenozip.